Hey, and welcome to this free guitar lesson. Arpeggios, they get a bad rap sometimes. I think amongst electric guitarists, arpeggios often conjure up images of spandex, hairspray, 64th notes, and a whole host of other questionable choices. However, when used tastefully, arpeggios are a game changer for your guitar technique. The real obvious reason is that if you play an arpeggio over top of a chord, the notes in the arpeggio are probably going to be the exact same as the notes in the chord. So as long as your playing is accurate, it's basically a guarantee that what you're playing is going to fit over the chord that's playing at that moment. I want you to also consider, though, that a lot of electric guitarists get stuck in the sort of wandering through scales style of improvisation. If I was to give an analogy, say, to learning a new language, the way a lot of electric guitar players kind of improvise almost sounds similar to how like a very young child sort of starts stringing sort of short, simple sentences together.
This is my house.
Yeah, like that. A lot of this is due to that when you play through scales, a lot of the notes are inherently quite close together in terms of their distance from each other in whole and half steps. However, when you play an arpeggio, structurally the notes are much more spaced out. So automatically, just as a result of playing an arpeggio, you kind of give a little positive shock to the listener's ear. And it sort of forces you out of that scale rut I was kind of describing earlier. That all sounds great, and if that's really true, why don't we just play arpeggios all the time? But the truth is, if we just sort of play up and down arpeggios, it does sort of begin to sound formulaic. So we have to be a bit creative in terms of how we play the arpeggios and how we integrate them alongside the rest of our electric guitar skills. And that's what I'm here to help you with, hopefully, today. Today, I'm going to give you 5 creative arpeggio licks, no spandex, no sweeping required. Before we dive in, I just want to say, and I apologize for the shameless self-promotion, if you consider liking this video, leaving us a positive, nice comment, or even subscribing to the channel, we really appreciate it, and every little bit does help. Let's dive in. This first example is going to be kind of a simple, sort of classic rock inspired line to start out with. I think we all know kind of the classic sort of string bending rock lead break, you know. What I'm doing here is I'm taking that familiar classic rock lead break and I'm replacing that classic string bend sound with a quick arpeggio. And then I'm descending down kind of a flashy pentatonic type phrase. So this is a pretty short, sweet, simple one just to get things kicked off. These examples are going to get progressively more challenging, but let's check this one out to start and have some fun with it. Next up, we're going to take a look at some major 7 arpeggios. If you're not familiar, major 7 arpeggios have a really cool, dreamy, almost ethereal sound to them. In this example, I'm actually going to play 2 different major 7 arpeggios, and I'm going to connect them with some nice blues-inspired soloing ideas. These have a really melodic, singable sound to them, so let's check them out. This being a C major 7 arpeggio, we have the root C on the 10th fret of the D string, then the 3rd E on the 9th fret of the 3rd string, the 5th G on the 8th fret of the 2nd string, and the 7th B on the 7th fret of the high E string. So we have, and when I hammer onto that 8th fret of the high E string, that's another root note there. So we have a complete major 7 arpeggio. I then descend down these notes on the B and G strings, and that sweet sounding major pentatonic phrase really caps off that section nicely. The last arpeggio is another major 7 arpeggio, and I'm hitting the root note on the D string, hammering on to the 3rd E, which is on the same string, the 14th fret, and then using my middle finger to get the 5th G, rolling my middle finger to the 12th fret of the B string to get the 7th B, and then hammering on to the root note C on the 13th fret of the B string. So next I'm doing a jump up to the 15th fret of the high E string, and I'm doing a little nice tension building slide where I'm sliding from an out of key note into an in key note, specifically from the 13th fret. So, and then this melodic phrase gives some nice melody to cap off that arpeggio. Next up, we're going to take a look at something called a minor 7 flat 5 arpeggio.
Say what?
If you're not familiar with music theory, don't worry, you're still going to be able to use these examples and get great benefit of them. There's a cool trick we can use with minor 7 flat 5 arpeggios. Specifically, if you're playing over a chord progression that's almost a little bit like bluesy or rock or funk influenced, you can use this trick. What we're going to do is we're going to play a minor 7 flat 5 arpeggio 3 half steps below the root note. So I'm going to be playing over an E minor backing track, and I'm going to play a C sharp minor 7 flat 5 arpeggio. This arpeggio involves me picking 16 on the A string and then hammering on to 19 on the A string. And with this, because you could sweep pick this, but really with the speed we're playing this at and how we're really wanting to squeeze the juice out of every note, I'm just kind of strict picking these notes. I'm not really sweeping these. I could sweep them if I wanted to, but I'm choosing to just pick them normally. So after that hammer on, I'm picking 17 on the D, picking 16 on the G, hammering on to 18 on the G, picking 17 on the B, and then 15 on the high E. We then have this little picking and pull-off combo. And what that is I pick the note, in this case 19, pull off to 15, do a big stretch, pick 21, pull off back to 15, pick 22, and then from 22, I go straight to the 20th fret of the B string. And this 20th fret of the B string is the same note as the 15th fret of the high E. But it's a little bit closer by, and it gets a little bit of an interesting kind of twang to it by switching to a different string rather than just going. It's subtle, but there is a difference in sound there, a cool one. Finishing off this lick, we have some kind of blues-inspired phrases. This really screaming high 1.5 step bend on the 19th fret of the high E. And just some nice sticky blues phrases, which really I feel that these blues phrases really complement the wide interval sound of the arpeggio, really giving you some raw grit as well as some cool melodic tones to complement the tune that you're playing these over. Next, we'll actually take a look at another minor 7 flat 5 arpeggio, and there's a bit of a cool trick here. When I ascend at the top of the arpeggio, it's going to come off like I'm playing some notes that are reminiscent of the E major pentatonic scale. Then I'm going to descend down an E minor pentatonic scale run. This is a really fun one, so let's check it out. This minor 7 flat 5 arpeggio, I'm picking 11 on the D string, hammering on to 14 on the D string, picking 12 on the G string, rolling my index finger over to pick 12 on the B string, hammering on to 14 on the B string, so, and then hitting the 12th fret on the high E string. The remainder of the phrase has this kind of choppy bend. These notes here, 12 and 14 on the B to the 12 on the high E, give me a little bit of an almost major pentatonic type of sound. It's got a bit of a brighter sound. And then when I continue with this, that's still kind of sounding more like major pentatonic rather than minor. But then, after I come out of that bend, I'm really going back into a minor pentatonic phrase. But by combining those two sounds, you really get an interesting mixture over kind of a rock or blues rock type of backing track. This next example is going to be based on a dominant 7th arpeggio. Specifically, I'm going to be playing a dominant 7th arpeggio descending down to the neck of the guitar using alternate picking and chromatic passing tones. So really what we have here is an arpeggio, but we're not just sweep picking up and down and going for just pure brute speed. We're mixing in some chromatic passing tones that are going to give a bit of a bluesy feel. And we're also covering a great deal of the guitar neck, which is going to give us some interesting tones. This one's pretty challenging, really gets the picking going, hopefully in a bit of a smooth, tasteful way as opposed to just a speed for speed's sake kind of way. Let's check it out. Okay, with this one, we've got a lot of 4-note per string action happening here, which is tricky. Lots of chromatic passing tones. Those chromatic passing tones are evident right here when I'm picking 19, 18, 17, and 16 on the high E. I'm then picking 17 and then 19 on the G, and here, I'm just using alternate picking. Similar pattern here. Here's the third of the arpeggio, passing tone, root note of the arpeggio, flat 7, and then the perfect fifth. Pretty much all alternate picking as well. I then continue down and continue sequencing this arpeggio where I'm going to hit the root note, flat 7, fifth, and then just to add a bit of a color tone, I'm actually hitting the third followed by the ninth. So we have, there's a bit of double stop, sort of soulful phrasing type action, just to cap things off. Last up, we have a pretty challenging arpeggio line, again based on a dominant 7 arpeggio, this time in the key of A. Let's check it out. So here I'm starting with an open string pull-off, specifically picking the 3rd fret on the high E, then picking 5 on the high E and pulling off the 3, another position shift, picking 9, pulling off to 5, then picking 5 and 8, or 8 and 5 I should say, on the 2nd string. So then I'm continuing my ascending up the neck by picking 9 and pulling off to 5 on the high E, then picking 12, pulling off to 9, picking 15, pulling off to 12, and then picking 14 and 10 on the B string. Then I'm picking 15 and pulling off to 12, picking 17 and pulling off to 15, and then we have a little bit of, we've got that 9th tone, the B note, and that comes into play when I pick the 19th fret and pull off to 15. And then I just descend down the A blues scale so that that gives you the whole sequence there. Okay, that'll do it for today's lesson. I really hope you enjoyed what we looked at here today and that you found these licks helpful. Remember, if you enjoyed what you saw here today, if you consider liking this video, leaving us a nice comment, or even subscribing to the channel, we really appreciate it, and it makes a huge difference as we build this thing here. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you again real soon. Cheers.